So can I please ask the three keynote panelists to come and join us at the table so that we can so they can share with us some of the reflections over this intense day of work. So would again, what we asked them was to share with us some of their considerations over the work of the day, so that we can get the our reflections in order. So I suggest we go with the same order that we followed last night, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you can be as brief or as long as you wish. Just a kind of concluding comments and thoughts. So.
Okay. Right. I think I shall be brief. Well, I'd like to start with saying that I have learned an awful lot in the course of the conference, yesterday and today. It has also confirmed to me the pervasiveness of legal matters in all things around, and how legal translation is everywhere, or legal language is everywhere, and by of course translation as well. I have found it quite interesting to have this combination of papers which have dealt, and I think particularly this afternoon, with really the nuts and bolts, the detail of legal language and legal translation. So this combination of those papers with other contributions which raise broader issues to do with transfer of knowledge, or knowledge exchange across space and time, more to do with perhaps more this morning. There are, I think, two themes that have been brought to the fore during the conference. As far as I'm concerned, the first is the fluidity of language, and how when we translate intralingually or interlingually, there are constant shifts between general language and specialized languages, in the same way as there are shifts between, from one specialized language to another. Again, and this has implications for translation. Okay. The second theme I will take back with me, and I think it's really food for thought, is this tension between commonality and particularity in the field of law, which is also a tension that can be found at the heart of a number of discussions about translation, and which has been articulated in various forms in translation studies. But I'm particularly aware of the importance of this tension in current debates on rights, not just human rights, but rights, human animal rights, etc., and justice, and this tension between the dream of universalism and the realities of local contingencies. Perhaps one quick comment about looking ahead. It's to do with the use of technology. There is a talk nowadays of what is called digital humanities, which offer really exciting opportunities for research. But there is also an ambivalent side to technology. When we look at the volume of data that we can collect from the internet, and which is not necessarily official data, as we have seen today, from various speakers referring to the reliability of the data, how much they knew about the data. And I think this can be a problem as well in terms of language which may look legal, but is not really official. So therefore, what is its status? And can I also bring in the issue of standardization that was discussed quite passionately earlier on? I'm just wondering whether we ought to talk about standardization in the context of international organizations, where certainly this is where universality, commonality will be, and standardization is a must. But that standardization doesn't have to trickle down to the level of the regional and the local. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So also I thank you for this wonderful event, because it's the interdisciplinarity of it makes all what we do, it makes sense when you hear other people and you relate it to what you're doing, and you see that it's a small world, although it looks like we're very wide apart, but at the end we are really talking about the same thing, which is fascinating. I really enjoyed some concepts that I heard today, like the different hats that translators have to keep on putting on and taking off, and the audiences, because that's something that probably not everybody is consciously aware of when they're making their choices. And the idea of changing ideas and changing context, that was brilliant, because then again this connects very well with what we were talking about yesterday. So that was really interesting. But then you hear someone, I can't remember who exactly, sorry, who was talking about trusting translators, that they are actually giving us a text that they have thought of. I think it was you, right? No, in the back. Sorry. And this brings me to the point that I always come, because I'm from the practical side. So I'm not a translator, but I try to find how can our studies have a social impact, and that's where all my studies go to. And for me, we need to, rather than look at the small texts and words, look at the bigger picture and look at the ethics of translation and that translators need to keep in mind. And I think more studies, maybe next year we'll have something on ethics and the idea of impact and training. So I'm afraid of saying standardizing the practices of translators, because I think that would be impossible. But knowing or talking about all the different challenges that we face while dealing with ethics at the same time helps people develop a certain idea, as we see today. So yeah, that's basically, and being open for different tools. You were saying digital humanities, and we saw a couple of papers talking about corpus, and maybe others that we don't know of yet. So rather than focusing on the things that we always do, how can we get away from that and start exploring new contexts? I'm trying to be very brief because everybody looks so sleepy, but I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Millie.
Well, I'll try to be even more brief than you. I have to thank Nancy and Gianluca for this wonderful experience we had the opportunity to share. I think that everyone has different thoughts and thoughts to bring back home, but As far for me, is the role of translator. I'm not a translator. It was an opportunity for me to think about the legal translator, and also the relationship between translation and authorship. I mean, legal translator virtually has to disappear. But sometimes he is a kind of author, not as in literature, but when a translator chooses to translate instead of not translating, or not to translate instead of translating, he or she contributes in a very important way to the life of law. In that case, the translator is an individual.
Mm-hmm.
But legal translators are not individuals. In very rare cases, the legal translator is an individual. The pioneer trying to translate from one context to another a concept. Maybe he is an individual, but the success of what he started depends on the number of translations that are made. And the number of translations is that make the language fit for translating from another cultural world. So there is an individual form of legal translation, a collective form of legal translation, and an institutional form of legal translation, which is, official translation is institutional. But not all the institutional translations are official, in the sense that I was thinking about the difference between official and non-official. A criterion could be that of saying that an official translation is, by definition, correct. Mm-hmm. Nobody can question that translation because it's the legislator itself that translates. So I was wondering, for example, about the translation into English of Algerian statutes. Has it the same standing of French translation of Algerian statutes? It's not a question, it's just I was wondering. But apart from the relation between institutional translation and official translation, I think that institutional translation is something very important in the last part of our debate about Arabic. Because it's very true that Arabic is one and multiple at the same time and diverse. And I think it's a reality. We cannot, I feel that we cannot, even if we put our efforts together, we cannot change that. The only way is, as Gianluca said, to have institutions, common institutions in certain sectors. Then you'll have a development of a common Arabic, which will not necessarily prevent the existence of different Arabics. If you think of EU law, we have European English, and we will keep European English even after Brexit, if it happens. And that's something different. When we translate into English a legal text, you have different kind of translation because, for example, a legal scholar translating into English or translating into Arabic has a huge readership because everybody can understand him or her, but it's not the same for translating a contract or translating a statute. So legal translation varies according to the object of translation. And we had also just a little, not a little, but your contribution about oral translation, which is something that deserves attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our keynote speakers for coming to us and sharing their knowledge and their comments on all the presentations, and thank you to all the presenters as well. It's really been a great event. I've made so many notes that I'll have to go back on and process. So thank you very much for all your contributions. For what I'm taking from it, I'm taking a few visual images from the presentations of, on the one hand, Claire and Hannah's linkages between moving parts, and then there's Rana's kind of the progress through time of these different terms changing in shape and going through time, and then Zekia trying to put slashes or additions to one term and trying to figure out how these choices are made, and then bringing into it the institutions and the speech act that is underneath it all. We want this to have an impact. This discourse then enacts something in the real world as a speech act, and of course in a minute we're going to do the speech act of closing the conference, but and we'll use hereby, to close it off. And but one thing is that I'm taking is that there is a hidden power to translators, that yes, they are constrained by audience, and yes, they are constrained by the function of the text, and yes, they are constrained by the inherited discourses that they inevitably have to work with. But they have this, we are still debating what these specific decisions are and what they do, and that is a hidden power that maybe we haven't, each person has kind of highlighted in a different way, given more or less degrees of power. And because of course I study political discourse, and because we are the governance program, I have to bring it back to power in the end. Gianluca will have a few words in a minute. I just have one last request of all of you, is if you could leave these name badges before you leave, put them on the table here so that we can recycle it and save a bit of energy and waste. So thank you all from me.
Well, I will then continue with the visuals, and it's partly also a way of thanking you for the richness of the individual contributions. That, I mean, to me, they actually embodied the different places where translation takes place. So this combination of different contributions from different disciplines and different also geographical interest, and is also historical interest. It served to actually embody the diversity of the operation of translation and of legal language in itself. So that to me has become here very tangible and very visible, which I think is something that we will carry with us, irrespective of the individual contributions that were particularly thought-provoking. Another very visual aspect of it is also the who. So this translator that is is completely denied, especially in law. So if I have to think of, Miriam was talking earlier about the reacting to the specificity of legal translation, and probably it's not a specificity either, but if I can think of one of the domains in which the role of the translator is most denied, that would be probably law, whereas I think we need to actually, as an action point for my actual future engagement as an academic, is precisely to make sure that when I cite a translation, I make sure to also mention the translator. For law, we started doing this for literature. I think we should start doing it for translation as well, so that then the operation of genealogy then becomes also easier, and we are better situated to actually reconstruct the intellectual history. So again, this many places where translation happens, and this many aspects of the person of the translator, I found it so tangible in the various papers that I couldn't have dreamt of a better embodiment. So very briefly, there is I don't remember if yesterday I mentioned it, but we do have plans for publication of on this theme, and so you will probably receive in the foreseeable future hereby. In due course, that was the one I was looking for. In due course, indications for that. We'll probably reissue a call for chapters, not as a call for abstracts as for the conference, but a call for chapters, which we will of course address firstly to the conference participants, but then we also want to keep it open in case someone who could not come wishes to participate. So that you will receive that. I don't know, you probably have your papers at different stages, so it's not imminent, but usually our practice within for the governance program is to get the publication out in a couple of years, which, considering the timing of academic standards, is super fast. So my last point is to, again, thank you individually, the presenters, because I feel that this, this tangible result could only be possible because of your individual contributions. And again, Nancy mentioned it at the beginning, if we think about, the distances that you've traveled and how much carbon footprint you have caused, but okay, let's not think about that. That's truly, truly, truly impressive. So it's a thank you individually to the individual participants, our keynote panel speakers, my co-organizer, and especially all the people that have made this possible beyond the three of us. So we have physically here Layal Muhammad, who is, if I have to visualize, since we are in visuals, if I have to visualize how this conference was actually possible, it had two columns. One was Layal and the other one was Nancy. So they're two gems, and we are very happy and proud to have them. But beyond them, there's also a host of people who have helped us. You probably noticed them with the green lanyard. Those are volunteers who, as part of their faith commitment, dedicate time to our institution, and that's quite touching. I feel touched every time. Including the people who helped us with lunch, with the coffee breaks, I'm really disappointed there were no cookies this morning, but we will raise this for the next conference. IT, yes, IT, who makes this possible, and George, who made sure that the booklet was actually in the conference pack that you had. So there's a host of people that have made these 2 days possible. But I would like also to have this general thank for those who participated on scene and behind the scene. Thank you.
Thank you to Gianluca for having the idea and bringing all of this together.
No, come on.